Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two people who are reshaping how artists get paid and connect with fans by rewiring music's core economics. One through a novel user-based centric streaming model, the other through a fan-powered royalties and AI-driven rights innovation. This discussion is very timely, and I promise you will leave here smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people in the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I'm a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music execs in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And also ask questions of our speakers. Also, folks, this is very important for everyone. Please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we cannot continue to do this for free. Special thanks to MedJet, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and my favorite industry podcast, Unlimited Supply. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my friend and alumnus of this platform, Michael Pelczynski. He is a music industry executive, deal maker, and strategist working at the intersection of rights, technology, and new commercial models. He's Chief Strategy and Impact Officer at VoiceSwap, which enables artists, right holders, and music businesses to create, manage, and commercialize authorized AI voice experiences. He's also Executive Vice President of Digital Strategy at Rostrum Pacific, an independent entertainment group. Most recently, he steered Surreal through its development and acquisition by Warner Music Group. Earlier at SoundCloud, he co-developed the industry's first fan-powered royalty system. Through board, advisory, and policy roles, including work with WIPO and Creative Rights and AI Coalition, he's helping shape the music industry's response to AI. Welcome back, Michael. It's great to have you here again, brother.
Thank you, Tom. No, love these, love these. Excited to be here.
Awesome. And joining Michael as today's featured guest is Neil Sheehan. A 30-year music entrepreneur, Neil has built businesses across artist management, concert promotion, recording, independent labels, and music tech. He founded and successfully exited two music companies and has developed Billboard number one artist, more than 25 Billboard charting artists, and gold and platinum selling acts. He's currently president at Vocana, an independent-only social streaming platform taking on three of music's biggest problems: unfair payouts, broken discovery, and widening disconnect between artists and fans. At Vocana, Neil is helping reinvent what streaming can be. Instead of pooling a subscriber's money and paying artists according to global market share, Vocana uses a true user-centric model. Each subscriber's music revenues go only to the independent artist that person actually streams. Vocana also turns anonymous streams into lasting, direct artist-to-fan relationships by giving artists the email addresses connected to every listener who streams them. The platform combines an indie-only catalog with social profiles, short-form video, private communities, and human-led discovery, reimagining the best parts of MySpace for today's music economy. Neil's mission is straightforward but disruptive. Help independent artists get found, get paid fairly, know who their fans are, and build careers without needing permission from traditional music business or major labels. It is my pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform today. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. You know what's funny? I was just gonna say quickly is that at the end of Tom's introduction, he said, Neil Sheen's trying to do something disruptive, which was trying to get people fair pay, data. I mean, it's all the shit that you really need, right? It should not be disruptive. It should be like what we should be doing. So I just,
Well,
I had to at least start with that. Like, wow, when people say that, I had somebody say that to me in Montreal actually yesterday. They said, you're really like bucking the system. And I said, well, if you were an airline and you were selling tickets to, a flight, and you didn't know who your customers were, and you weren't paying fair wages to your pilots. Do you think your pilots would keep flying? And if you had no data on your customers, would they come back and they're like, no? And I said, well, yeah, so we're not really doing anything disruptive. We're just trying to, kind of even keel, make this a little more fair in the world. So
and I think
anyway,
that's when you say welcome to the music business or industry or whatever it is.
yeah, yeah. It's the I don't know. It just always whenever I hear somebody say that, it's like, man,
It's true.
if I was really a disruptor, I guess, I'm throwing a spoke in a bicycle wheel a little bit by trying to change some things, but I don't know if I would consider myself a disruptor. It's more of just trying to get people what they need, right? To actually
Yeah.
survive in this, not only the economy, but make a career out of this. So I digress.
I mean, it's all in the spirit of good fight, right? Like, I think that's the other thing too, is the industry always has a problem facing itself. Like it has a hard time admitting when it made mistakes. I think honestly, it's like, wait, that's a really good point, actually. I mean, it's almost like disruption through logic.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is how it should work, but we're not going to work that way. So, um, yeah, look, I've doing this 30 years. I think I never went to, I was, as you and I were talking to earlier, I just got back from Montreal this morning speaking at this International Society for Music Educators, and it was really eye-opening about how many people that are trying to come into the music business, whether they're an artist that just plays the saxophone or the trumpet, and they want to be a session player, to somebody that wants to be a record label executive or a manager or a booking agent, and they've gone through 4 years or whatever these degrees are, and some of the stuff that they learn when they come out is it's textbook, but it's not the kind of common sense street smarts you kind of need. And I don't know. I kind of like look at myself as very fortunate. I started at 21, just starting my first concert promotion company, and I didn't have any education. I literally just took a deep dive, and every single maturation point of my career has been that way, where I've just kind of learned on my own. Um, and there's no music business 101. And I think to your first point, it's if somebody doesn't say this is how it should be, or these are better ways to do things, then we are just caught in this flywheel of, you know, I don't want to say the old heads, it's a bad way to say it, but the old business model will just continue. And it's going to take a lot of people, or at least something that goes viral, essentially, that proves that there are alternatives to how this can work. Um, it's just getting enough of those people to believe that the alternative is the correct way. And I think when you show people money, data, those are all things that people can understand from any side of business. And when you tell them how the music business works versus another business, they all go, wow, you guys are kind of doing it backwards. So,
It's interesting too, because it's actually like what Matt's comment is in the chat, which is, there's no playbook.
hmm,
Think you said before we jumped on, right? Like the Passment book, like essentially that where you were in that forum, it's like almost, I mean, there's great programs. There's, Berkeley and institutions and the Bandier program and I don't know, what is it, Clive Davis School, right? Like there's all these institutions that are trying to prepare, the future artist, executive, manager, but there's nothing like on the ground
yeah.
experience. And it's funny, the playbook comment, it's like I feel like I don't know about you. How do you feel like over time, however many years someone's in this, the playbook is actually the mistakes made. And it's almost like the industry making the mistakes, continually making the mistakes, or not paying attention to the things that were important becomes the playbook. And anyone who like studies it enough or has been there or like adjacent to those things like ends up being the most whatever, let's call it educated or experienced, but educated to being, what do we do around this next corner? I feel like it really is it's super interesting. So wait, what was the
It's
full
almost like it's that's a perfect parallel to today's Homer's Odyssey, right? Like you watch the Odyssey, you're like, there's so many ways he could have got out of that. But he was just showing you all the bad ways, right? Like
Mhm.
this is why it took me 10 years. I mean, there's gods involved, but at the same point, yeah, you're right. Like the books are, what you shouldn't have done or the lesson you learned.
Totally. And it's, it's fun. I was going to ask you because I knew it was around then when you were 21, starting your whole story and your arc. I was going to ask you, when did you actually start to give a shit about music?
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like, when was that? When was it where you were like,
that's a good question.
you know what I
Uh,
mean? Before that
no, no, no,
21.
no. Yeah, like look, I think my track of getting into music was probably much different than those that wanted to get into the music industry. I was a college tennis player, and when I got out of college, I went and worked for IMG, which was a sports
Wow.
agent, and I quickly was kind of thrown into their entertainment division. And they did that because in college I was a turntable DJ, like the old school. I'm dating myself. I'm 52, so you used turntables and DJs, or record players and stuff. So and they thought, well, gosh, he's the youngest guy here. Why don't we just throw him in there? You're right, Matt. IMG was great until they got out. Pat Downey is in this as well, and he worked at IMG too. But long story short, I was plopped into this, and then I started meeting some of these booking agents via IMG. And long story short, I started my own concert promotion because they wanted me to move, and I was very young, wasn't going to move. And
Yeah.
I just started booking concerts, and it wasn't for like the love of music or because I was looking for a music career. It was the first job out of college that I had learned and met people. So I was like, well, I can network myself, I can get into venues, and I can book bands. And it quickly ballooned into having, 25 people working for me, and we were booking concerts all over the place.
Oh, wow.
And it was several steps until I realized, okay, I want to help because I would see the lengths of what a band would do to tour, right? Some bands or artists would get in a van, eat ramen noodles, and do a 30-day tour. But then they would never get back to those states, right? And that's like,
Hmm.
well, this is kind of idiotic, right? Like if you don't go back to Tallahassee and you're from Wisconsin, how do you keep that fan base? Right.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, well, here's one bad problem with the music industry because they're being told they have to do this to get a record deal. Got to go on tour, got to go on tour, got to go on tour. And then we started
Yeah.
managing some of those bands. And with management, we started getting record deals for those bands. So then I started seeing contracts and looking over contracts, and I'm thinking, wow, in perpetuity's in here a lot. And what the fuck does in perpetuity mean? Right? Like, I'm assuming if I don't know and I'm a young guy, the bands don't know. Right. So
Yeah.
you start seeing that and you're like, oh wow, here's another kind of issue, right? That could be solved. Opened up a couple of recording studios, saw how producers and engineers were taking points, and bands and artists were signing off on that, not knowing what they were giving up in the long term.
Hmm.
Sold those companies, started a label, and then obviously when I was at the label, it was like, okay, now I see the economics of it from a full circle. So it was probably this 8 or 9 year incubation period when I just was learning the music business myself, making my own mistakes, and I was like,
Yeah.
what wrongs can be right? And I think it was probably, when I like was 30, when I was like, this is when I really give a fuck. This is when I want to like do something with this, figure it out, do what I can, have an independent label, do licensing deals versus just straight record deals, try to do something for artists versus just because the status quo says you have to do it this way. So it took quite some time, but again, I didn't have the benefit of mentorship. I didn't go to school. It was all just kind of, they say school of hard knocks, but it was really, I wasn't also clamoring to get into the music business. So it took a little bit.
Which is interesting too, right? Because I was going to ask along that along that path, right? What one thing that seems to have stuck is your your loyalty and admiration for independence. Like, is that is that part of just because the way things went? You know, you ended up working with independent artists, and that's where you, like you said, you figured out where you made your mistakes, and then you built that wealth of knowledge and breaking acts and building recording studios. You know, it's almost like creating, small enterprises within communities and that whole jazz. Like that, like usually tends to fire up people. Oh, by the way, I used to DJ in my teens too. I did the whole in the city in New York. I would go to clubs and play like underage. That was my way of like
Yeah.
dabbling into and yeah, playing records. So it was like mostly like weird drum and bass stuff, and then the path goes to other weird places. But it was like that kind of bug you get where it's the com so overused term, but like community, right? Like
Yeah.
there's this aspect of, human inherent belonging, and you're just like, oh, this is great. Like I feel something.
Yeah.
And then, then you're willing to do the looking into the agreements, like you said, taking the time, even if it's something you're doing for the first round of, trying to understand the business, you're willing to stick through it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because like you've stuck with the independence of it all. Like before we go super deep and philosophical and asking what does independence mean?
Yeah.
What, like
I look, I think true. The only reason I think I stuck with independence was because when you're brand new at something, right? I was what they call a greenhorn in any kind of industry, right? So I couldn't have walked into Jason Flom's office at Lava back in the day when Kid Rock was the shit and Lava had this huge name to them and say, "Hey, I want a job." So I was stuck booking and managing acts that were literally playing in venues that were 50 to 300 cap rooms. So and again, I consider that we can get into the deeper discussion of subjectivity of independence, but it was independent to the part where nobody else was helping these folks, right? So they were independent
yeah.
on their own. They were working at Chipotle during the day, trying to play a show at night and write songs and then play two or three shows on the weekend. So the independent was, I also understood from kind of a selfish place that when I went to school, I paid for my own college. My dad was a military guy, so my whole life was kind of
Definitely.
doing things independently. My dad taught me those things, so I saw the work ethic in these people. So, if I had been
Good
thrown into the
call.
major label world, would I have a different viewpoint of it? I don't know, but I also saw how hard they worked and in some semblance were pushed to the side and looked at as a minor league system versus a major league system. The bell
Mhm.
that went off in my head was I would go to minor league baseball games, $7 single
Yeah.
A minor league baseball. And these kids are, you know, the score was either 30-9 or 0-0 because they either all had a couple guys that could crush homers or the pitchers were really good. But these guys were making $400, getting on a bus, playing in little shit towns. And I
Yeah.
liken that to these independent bands that were doing the exact same thing. And it was like you could just kind of respect the grind. And I saw what the major teams were doing. They were then going down and pilfering all the good minor league players and bringing them up. And what I finally realized once we started having a management firm and had a record label was as soon as I had a band in Billboard 25, I got a
Sure.
knock. Hey, it's so and so from Warner. Hey, it's so and so from Muni. Looks like you got a good band there. And I was like, okay, well, I see the game. Like the independence was this is your feeder system because either your A&R is not good or you don't
Yeah.
want to invest in artists like you used to do with Bruce Springsteen with 10 albums before one hits. So I just had this affinity at that point, like, well, I'm going to keep helping those people because at some point, hopefully the independents can just do it on their own without having to sell out. So that's how I've just kind of stuck with the independent community. I think it became a part of me to see all the steps they all had to take, and then hopefully at some point have enough power or enough sales and revenue or data behind them that they didn't have to sell out. So
Yeah.
that's always kind of been this thing in the back of my mind is if you can help those people, then you may be creating another set, another scene, another community that, you know, potentially could be major label, but don't need to be if they don't want to be.
It's interesting. what jumped out from what you just said too is the work ethic, because it could
Mhm.
be incredibly contagious, right? And then there's putting in also the faith into an act or band or an artist or whatever it is, DJ, a label, an imprint, you know, a
Yeah.
venue. Like it's interesting because hearing you say work ethic is like, how is that seen today for the independent from that time, right? That time is interesting too because you could go on the road, you sell your merch, and you sell actual records. Give me $10 for this, give me $20 for that, give me three for this. You know exactly what the money is for. You know, obviously this is a way to pivot to the our Volcanic conversation. But this is like it's just interesting because it was you knew how much you put in and you knew exactly what you would get back.
Yeah.
And you just talked about like data, right? Where, you know, data was much more analog because everything was more analog. And the more digital we all got, which is great, convenient, you know, I can, you know, next thing you know, we're gonna Uber Eats artists or something. I don't know. But like artistry,
That would be interesting.
yeah, I don't
I
know.
need the mariachi band at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I don't know. Like who knows, you know? But it's interesting just to think like especially with when we first met and you approached me about Vakana and like the whole proposition, it was really interesting because just the simplicity, boldness of being like, hey, this is a streaming platform for independents only. And then, you know, like immediately like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And then just realizing that it's probably it's one step closer to not competing with things that you shouldn't necessarily compete with, right? Like if you're housed at Walmart with all the other CDs and all the other records, you're still, you know, technically someone's coming out to buy you a record and they might come across something else and like, I only got $20, but I could buy you these two, you know. But
Hmm.
like in this, like you said, this economy of music and digital economy, it's so hard to do and have that work ethic, but then still be competing against everybody and every band and everything that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just interesting, like, yeah, what is your thoughts on that too? And like that time and what you described, and then today, like even just your trip to Montreal, right?
Yeah.
Conversations you said you were having before we jumped on, like all the younger, you know, next generation of artists and you know, people that have entrepreneurial kind of ambitions to be artists and creative, but still do something within the business sphere of it, right? What you're thinking on all that new crazy?
It's weird because I luckily I kind of straddled both economies at some point because when I started as a booking agent, CDs were still king, right? I'm
Yeah.
talking late 90s, early 2000s, and the management part of we opened up a management firm within the concert promotion firm and a couple of recording studios. So we kind of had this. We could manage you, we could book you on a tour, we could press your CDs, we could shop you to a label. And we saw how the biggest cliff for all of those was they could work hard. They could get in the studio, pay a lot, even though Pro Tools was just kind of coming out and it was getting a little cheaper. They could go on tour, which was expensive, but probably a little cheaper for gas prices. A lot more independent little venues were all over the place at the time. And yes, when they got to a show, or if they could get a CD in a store through like a rack jobber or something, those were ways that you were grinding your way into a career. And I think the linchpin that changed it all for me, or what I saw, was this kind of democratization of distribution, right? Like you would grind and grind and grind on tour, try to get a CD into a store, which is hard to do, make some analog connections at venues, and then bang, social media happened and distribution happened. And I don't want to say the work ethic took a step back, but Spotify came in to say, all right, well, now you can put your music everywhere in front of everybody,
Hmm.
which took off distribution off the table. You could just record a CD and put it out there. Social media allowed you to connect with everybody very quickly. The MySpace contingent. there was stuff before MySpace as well, right? That now you didn't have to go tour and not have a dialogue with them without having the old analog email address on a notebook. Now I can actually have a one-on-one. So I don't want to say I saw a little bit less of the work ethic when the younger kids were coming in, they got that versus
Mhm.
the older generation didn't. But I think now we're at an inflection point where all those earlier people that just got in when the DSPs started in social media, they've
Yeah.
gotten to the point where they feel like, well, I should just be able to put music out and it should be listened to. I should always have fan data. And what you find now, fast forward 5, 10 years from that, is this didn't democratize the way you listen to music. Like you just said, now you're one in a million of all of these songs on these things, plus add the additional 90,000 that are coming from AI a day. And you have that problem again. So now you have to go from no ethic to a max work ethic to get your music listened to via all of these other things that are coming through that pipeline. And it's the same with the social media. The social media, again, was an easy way not to have a work ethic. You would just send somebody to a MySpace page or you would just send them to your website. Now there's so many. You send somebody to Instagram, TikTok,
Yeah.
YouTube, Spotify, Deezer, and you have a link tree. And so it's again, now you have to work. You have to work harder because you're sending them so many people. And your job is now not just become a music person, but you're now a marketing person and all these other things. So I've been lucky. I've seen this whole kind of again maturation period of people that came in very early and it was harder, then it got a little easier, and now the things are getting kind of confusing again and fragmented. I'm not sure where that goes. I mean, again, Volcano, we're trying to assist in that. That's probably one of the things that we are trying to do. But I think music and music business, for me at least, I have seen it's been very cyclical, right? Like
Mhm.
just like certain genres and styles come back, I think the way people view business and do business in the music industry stays in this one kind of format, right? Like that there's always
Yeah.
a way where it's harder or easier, harder and easier based on the technology or the progression that happens. But it all boils down to the same thing. How hard is the artists themselves going to work to get to the next step? Because what I would always hear from the younger kids was, well, I put out a CD and I went on tour. I don't understand why I'm not signed. And it's like, okay, well, you just started. That's kindergarten, right? Like everything
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
from there is now hard. And I think, unfortunately, with the TikToks of the world and America's Got Talent, people now are back to this, oh, it just should happen overnight. And it doesn't. And this, again, goes into the education to independent artists that, you are going to have to work. And if you can find certain ways around the hard parts, uh,
Yeah.
then you actually have a shot at it to build a career.
It's interesting too because it's almost, growing up, being in scenes, however different. MySpace was interesting. Like I immediately visually go to like the New York City indie rock scene and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
how, everyone from the Strokes and Black Keys and I mean like massive, massive bands that
absolutely.
were, either coming through town or were locals. And it was just a really great, simple way to be like, hey, have you heard of this band? Or have you seen these guys or these gals? And you just show up and everything's right there. And you get, what was it? I think it was like 6 songs you get to try real quick.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh wow, this is a nice, really quick way to just share amongst community. Simple, simple genius, right?
Hmm.
And there's enough social. It's not like aggressively social. I don't know even if it's a term, but like, how we're to your point, TikToks and everything, it's just all feeds
Yeah.
and just constant flow of everything. And I'm just thinking back with nostalgia to you just saying that too, is it was just easy to use, easy to share and get a taste of something. And then being like, I either like it or I don't. And if I do, I dig in. If I don't, I move on. And then the hardest bands that work that just kept doing the thing that they're doing, there's always the Hail Mary element of it, right? But that was a platform that helped so many bands become massive. Like
Yeah.
I remember even like my friend shared I forget what this was, 2000, I don't know, one of the five, six, seven, I can't remember. He's like, go check out this band called the Black Keys. They're gonna come through Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Like they're great, just 2 guys, right? And I was like, whatever, let's go see them. And I listened to the records. I'm like, oh wow, this is pretty good. And this is before that became a Live Nation venue, right? This is just
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, and then just that simplicity. So I wanted to bring that into if you want to talk, because I'd love to hear you talk about the ethos of Volcana.
Sure.
That's the thing that like the simplicity, but then you have the access to everything you just said, right? A band wants to know who's listening. They
Yeah.
want to know who actually is engaging, who's being social, being able to DM people or message them directly. Like I think still goes to the question of what does independence mean? Because even I think who was it in this chat? I think it was Dick Huey. You mentioned like transfer of talent, right, from majors and then they go independent and have amazing careers, right? Like that aspect. Where do you see Volcana positioned when it comes to the independent? Like me just going through that example of MySpace and what it did at the time. Like how do you envision that? What is Volcana to the independent artist?
Yeah. Let me start with the Black Keys. So I lived in
Yeah.
Cleveland. I had a recording studio in Cleveland. They were from Cleveland. So I used to see them at two clubs, the Grog Shop, and they used to play the Agora all the time before they blew up. And it was, yeah, it was two guys, but they kind of took over Cleveland. It became a little small community as
Yep.
these things always do, right? And then, it takes off. But yeah, well, let me first start by saying, how I see Volcana playing out. I think the more important thing for those that don't know why we even started Volcana, right? Like what's the ethos behind it, and maybe that'll answer some of the independent question.
Hmm.
Um, when I was asked to be president of Volcana, I'm not the owner. I was uh, an executive recruiter called me that two gentlemen wanted to start an independent streaming platform, and just like you had asked, I was like, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And the two owners were kind of live music aficionados. They would go out and see live shows. They own their own businesses, but they love live music, and they would see tip jars on bars, and were questioning why a band that was playing a show and had Spotify needed a tip jar. And the more they talked to these folks, the more they heard, streaming payouts aren't very, very good, and people don't know who their fans are. So when I came on board, I talked to them and I said, look, uh, being in the independent space, I think the only way you have a business is really providing solutions to problems. And the four problems I saw from the independent side, since that's what I came from, was yes, fair pay, right? Like if somebody could come up with a true user-centric system where your dollars go just directly to the people you listen to, I would assume that most independents would, if they heard about it and got a check that paid more than their other DSPs, would lean into something like that. Unfortunately, money is what makes the world go round, and if they're making more, they're going to lean into that. Secondarily to that was kind of that data play that we had talked about, right? Like they would all, most independent artists, and me coming from a label, whenever we got our analytics from any of our DSPs or distributors, it would say you have a listener from New
Yeah.
York or 1,000 from Miami, but none of it was actionable. Again, it's like not knowing
Yeah.
who was in your airplane. If you sold tickets to people in the back of the airplane, you're just flying people around. So I was like, why aren't we not giving back real data? Now, from a business standpoint, I understand some of that. If you are a large corporation, you don't want to give up your data, right? And
Yeah.
there may be some fear that, hey, if I give up too much data, they will leave and take that data and do their own thing with it. Uh, I deduced that if I'm an independent artist just starting out, or even if I have a seminal mid-level career, if I'm getting 100 emails addresses a day from everybody that streams me, why would I bail on that? Because if you think about it, most people are going to come back to that place to get more email addresses. So yes, they can do something with that, but my ethos is not to make a penny off of every single thing that comes through Vocana, right? Like I would
Yeah.
rather give them some data to be able to monetize their fans, or at least know who their fans are. So those were kind of two solutions that we wanted to say how we could help independents. The third was kind of the unfair competition, right? Like again, coming from a label standpoint at the time, it was impossible to get on editorial playlists in these DSPs, right? We were fighting against, Drake and Taylor Swift and all these other people. So I said, look, if you're going to do independence only, and this is where you get to the philosophy of what independence is, I would strip out all the major label content. Like, look, if you do not do licensing deals with Universal, Warner Brothers, and Sony, you've really taken out most of the people that are on most of these playlists, or at least have some lean in from somebody within those DSPs that are assisting those companies, right? So
Yeah.
now, anytime something comes up on an algorithm or a playlist or that's shared, as long as be true discovery, it may be a band that you would never have ever imagined finding, and here you go, you find a brand new band. And then last but not least, it was kind of this the social aspect of it, right? What you and I were just talking about on MySpace, essentially you had a band had a profile page, a fan had a profile page, there was a streaming platform, and everybody kind of stayed in this flywheel. And it was like, okay, you could talk to the band, you could see their top eight, shows, everything were put in there. People were merchandising in there. It was a wild west, but you knew if you were in a band, you had to have a MySpace page because you used to send out MySpace / Bazooka Joe, and that was your website.
Yeah.
People knew that's where you went. So today it became so fragmented that an artist is now sending a link tree of all the different places you have to go to be able to find your community. So we said those are the four problems we kind of wanted to solve, right? Bring those things back to independence. So that's what we kind of done in the last 4.5 years. But to answer the bigger play is, you know, independence and what does this look like moving forward? I think what we would love an artist and the fan. We have two customer bases, right? We have fans that want to listen to music and discover music, and then we have artists that want to get fair paid and discover. So we have two different customer bases that we have to market to and actually have narratives for. And I think on the fan side, I want this just to be a place where anytime you are talking with your pal, whether he's a friend of yours, social media wise in Hawaii and New York, you guys can get on one platform and discuss music. You can share
Yeah.
music, discuss music. Everything in your feed, any kind of video is all just centric to music and independent artists. I'm not trying to go to subreddit to find out or any of these other places. So I want that just to be the community. And within those communities, you can break them into hubs, like a metal genre hub that I can go in there and talk to. I don't think that exists today anymore. And then for the artists, I just want them to have a home where they feel like, look, yes, I need my music on all of these DSPs and I need a merch shop. I understand all that stuff. But at some point, I need to have a home that pays me a fair wage for my music, and I can still make the pennies on the dollar at the other places. I'm not going to take my music off those other ones. But if I
Yeah.
send my fan base here, and that's where they go primarily, I'm going to make more on this one, and I hope to make the ancillary revenue elsewhere, right? So I want them to also feel like this is where you come to talk about everything that happens in your band. Sure, you can have jam bass and all these other ones to put your concerts, but at least here, I can talk to my fans directly. I can DM with them. I know exactly who they are. I can have private conversations with them. So it's more of like I'm building a home for both. I'm building a home for a fan. I'm building a home for an artist. So now, whenever Vocana comes up, the brand itself, the name is that's just the home for independence, whether you're an independent fan or an independent artist. This is where I'm going to go when I begin. So that's
Yeah.
kind of our ethos. And it doesn't take, we're not trying to be a unicorn and have everybody in there, right? Like it doesn't take multi-millions to make this work. It takes a few 100,000, maybe 1 million people in there, like finding bands, and then it'll start taking off and people will talk about this is where I find my music and this is where I talk to my bands.
It's also like really great real estate. It's real simple, your top like those top six
Mhm.
artists or music you're listening to that you curate like someone, a darling drops out, second month in because you've played it out, or I don't know, there's something else that has just really got your attention. I remember even just having that approach of that simple real estate, like you said, going back and forth, like you and me talking about music, say on Volcana. And then I go to your profile and I see you have something up there that wasn't there before. I'm like, oh, what's that? You click on it, you go to the act, and then it's that simplicity too, which I think is so overlooked in the industry. Just having
Yeah,
simplicity that community forms around the simplicity usually.
I say
Uh,
it all the time whenever, we're lucky that our ownership has hired PR and things like that. And I tell our PR all the time the same thing. I said, and even the ad agency that we use, people move in tribes. And
mhm.
and once you find an independent artist or an independent fan, they are somehow inundated with one tribe, right? Like they are part of this one tribe and they will move with that tribe and people will discover things within that tribe. And I think we've gotten away from some of this tribalism and just doing a lean back. And hopefully, Spotify is giving me something based on something I've said in the microphone that it picked up, and it's giving me a song. Or my Facebook has done the same thing, or Google. And it's not, it's a very lean out experience. And I'm hopefully being fed something versus if I find my tribe on Vocana in a hub, let's say it's a metalcore hub or a city like a Nashville hub. Those people I trust, I know, I can see immediately on their page who they listen to, what shows they've gone to, and I'm like, oh shit, I kind of get what that person does. I'm gonna immediately
Exactly.
jump into that tribe, and then you find music you discover. It's just easier than this fragmented mess that we have now, and everybody takes this step back and wants it to be force fed to them.
Would you say it's easier to build community or technology? Now that you're talking about
Oh,
it. Because it's like it's interesting because that always, you're talking about also, you know, they're very two very different things, but they're interconnected, right? And like just the way you
yeah.
talked about it is so interesting because it's yeah, I mean, I have my
I
thoughts.
would Well, look, I think if you look at us going from Neanderthal man to today, they all built a community around something, right? Whether it be
Yeah.
fire or food or hunting. So you can consider that technology. They all got together to do something.
Yeah.
I don't know which is easier to build. I will say being a
Or harder.
non
Or which one's
yeah.
harder?
Being a non-tech person, I will say seeing what's happening with chat and Claude is absolutely crazy. But at the same point, I've used it enough, even though I'm a layperson that it does have errors.
Yeah.
But I think creating technology will probably become fairly easier. But I think the bigger question is not what's easier or harder, but what's more true, right? Like, and I think a community of people that you trust is more true than technology because technology is not a person that doesn't think on its own. So I would trust a community more than I would trust my technology at that point.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I like that. And it's almost like if there is technology that is being adopted by a community and is being used, it's kind of you end up in a way that you see it's helping the community shape itself or interact with each other. You kind of you start to give it some trust.
Yeah.
Then usually there's what's the term? Enshittification. There's the
I was in
inevitable.
Montreal and some guy sat me down. He said, "Hey, can I take 5 minutes of your time?" I said, "I got 2 minutes. I got to go into this panel." And he goes, "Have you heard of?" I forget the guy's name. And he goes, "It's the enshittification." And I'm like, "This is like the fourth time somebody has talked." So I literally need to Google that. Did somebody write a book or something? It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
all
yeah, yeah.
right.
And it's just, it's got like the little emoji that looks
Well,
like a
hey,
token.
it's a perfect word because I've heard it enough now that I'm going to have to go do my due diligence and find out exactly what it is.
But that's usually technology losing its way, right?
Yeah.
It's losing the point of what initially it was made for or intended for, or like Instagram was for taking pictures and using filters, and then look where it is now.
Yeah, look what it is today.
You
Somebody
know,
put in here, Smitty put thoughts on indie venues, promoters withholding ticket buyer data from artists. Look, being a former concert promoter, I never had that information either. I was a third party promoter. So if you can understand how this works is I would go and rent a AEG or Live Nation, back then it was Clear Channel, and we would sell tickets, right? I didn't even get that information from anybody that bought it through like the corporate Ticketmaster AEG website. So I defer to somebody like a Randy Nichols, who's all over LinkedIn, met him several times. I think he's speaking in
oh
front of
yeah, yeah.
Congress and everything. Super fucking smart guy on ticketing. Um, if I had my way, yes, I think you should have. I think anybody that's doing a service for somebody, whether it be band, comedian, or whatever, should have the access to the people that are coming up and to see them. Like I don't understand. I do understand why some people would want to not allow them to have it, but I just think it does a disservice, right? It makes you beholden to the other people. So that would be my take. Somebody else
Oh,
wrote something in here.
yeah, there was a good question from what happens if if an indie artist then gets picked up by a major, what happens to them?
Ah, perfect question. So I've had this put to me several times. Look,
Mm,
um, in the grand scheme of things, this is how I see it playing out. I could be I could be wrong. Let's say Michael comes on as an indie darling. All of a sudden, he's getting streams out the wazoo. His checks from Vocana are 10,000 fold of what he would be getting on any other DSP. Somebody swoops in from Universal, takes Mike to a nice filet mignon dinner and says, "Hey, we're going to give you a maxed out credit card with the worst interest rate ever," which is a record label deal. And you're stuck with that, but you can come on board with us. But we need you to take all your masters down from everywhere else. I think Mike would have hopefully some leverage to say, I built a career at Vocana, or I get data from Vocana, or my checks at Vocana are fairly good. I would like to keep that there. Now, they could in turn say, well, we'll give you more data, we'll give you more money. But the one thing Mike could say, and we would love him to say, is my community is there. So if my community is there, I can't guarantee they're all going to leave. And maybe some of that community is very indie centric and doesn't want Mike to leave to a major label. Now, that doesn't mean Mike can't leave to a major label, but I would hope, again, this is all a hope, that whoever got pilfered from us as a minor league system would have some affinity for where they started and would like to keep their stuff there. I would tell you from a Volcana standpoint, we would never pull off anybody's catalog that went major if they don't want it down. Obviously, I would not control the power of that if the major label makes them do that. But we would
mm.
always defer to the artist to keep anything that was on from their catalog prior to being a major on our platform for sure.
It's also interesting, what, like the speaking of the moment of maybe we talk about what does independence mean, right? It's that scenario you just described is being able to make your own decision,
Yeah,
right? I would like to still be on this platform. I think the QA mentioned, right? Like, oh wait, but this major doesn't have a deal with Volcana, right?
yeah,
Well, then can you figure it out? Because this is where my community is, which is an amazing reason to, like you said, that's the North Star, right?
yeah,
And but what's interesting is like that's what it's kind of become. Independence has become this like having the freedom to make decisions. And that's not even just for artists, that's even labels, distributors, like, there's a lot of that weird cross collaboration code, like someone's on a label, but the label is being distributed by this company, and then that company somehow is tied to a major or the other way around, or so there's this, it's an interesting kind of, I think you guys also coming to the market has, and like amongst all the other things that are making people ask those questions, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
what does it mean to be independent, right? There's a platform for independence, right? There's something really interestingly bold about that. Everything you said makes sense, but it's also kind of, yeah, where do I lose decision power? Where do I
Yeah.
lose decision, or even the influence to make a decision? Um, oh, we got,
Yeah, just
oh,
to
yeah.
piggyback on that, I just wanted to say one thing I get at any conference I go to or anytime we talk to an artist is what is independence? And look, it's a hard question. It's a subjective question to the person because I always say the same thing. Somebody could say Taylor Swift is independent, right? Uh, uh, I think making your own decisions obviously quantifies in some way being independent. However, as we've all seen in the past year or so, a DistroKid or a CD Baby or something are getting bought by large corporations or what you would consider major labels. So if we
Mm,
have that content on our platform, is that still considered independent? I think
yeah.
for us at Bocana, it really just boils down to what we think is independence. At this point, we have just said we would like to go after non-traditional major labels. So the Sony, Universal,
Yeah.
Warner Brothers of the world. Now, does that mean we can't use their subsidiaries like Red or
Hmm.
ADA or InGrooves? I don't know. I mean, potentially we could, but we're luckily fluid enough that I think we wanted to start at the very DIY, independent, level, because those are probably the people that need the most help today.
Yeah.
I have had transparently meetings with major label people that are like, "Hey, we would love to try this. I don't know whether we could." Da, 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 and the conversation's bad around. I will say, for Volcana's sake, we aren't going to go out there and have those conversations. If they want to come and talk to us, they can come and talk to us, but that doesn't mean we're going to do it. But I will entertain talking to anybody. I mean, I'm kind of a loudmouth on LinkedIn, so I'll talk to anybody just to meet people and network. But kind of the ethos of it now is, if you are an independent artist going through an independent distributor, well, this for sure is home. And if you have other distributors that may or may not have a parent, well, we will talk to you if you're allowed to do things. But we are not going to go out and have sit down meetings with large major label places at this point.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
By the way, just to be mindful of time, and we have a great question from Jack. Can you
Okay.
speak about AI in the music industry, how to use it?
Ah, well,
So,
it's a good segue.
yeah, I mean, how could we have this conversation and not talk about this?
Yeah.
Um, One thing I wanted to say though, which
Yeah.
is not really talked about, and I know you're out there talking about this a lot. Why does user-centric matter? Why is it such a differentiator? All this stuff, right? You and I can talk about that ad nauseum.
Yeah.
But the thing that's really interesting that people don't realize at large or get forgetful is like a user-centric platform means it could be flooded with all the AI, however many hundreds and thousands and millions of songs. If I'm paying a subscription and I never listen to I know my full subscription that month is only going to the artist I go to, which is also a huge deterrent to a flood of AI. Like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that also, Jack, to your question, the economic model of a platform is so important to everything that Neil you've been saying, right? Like, it's against streaming fraud, against the flood of AI, whatever it is, like it doesn't matter if half of the platform is listening to AI. It doesn't matter. Your subscription goes to what you listen to. So but yeah, that was just one headline definitely wanted to touch on. But yeah, I mean, AI in music.
Yeah, look, I think it's subjective, just like the independent. Like, if you are in the studio and you use Pro Tools just to use for a drum track, is that considered AI, right? I had some of these discussions in Montreal, because a lot of producers were there that were teaching music production, and they were wondering what is considered AI. And I don't think anybody really knows right now. I mean, this is all, I don't want to say in its infancy, but I think it'll flesh itself out at some point. I will say, from a Vocana standpoint, we haven't taken a stamp where we're like, hey, we don't want AI, we won't have AI. Look, we take our feed from aggregators like DistroKid, CD Baby, etc. So whatever's on their platform comes to
Yeah.
us. Now, what we do have is a third-party partnership with Jambase, who are great partners, and we run all our bands against Jambase. So if you're looking at a band's profile page or their music, if they've ever toured or are going to tour, have tours coming up, it'll say human verified artist. Now, does that mean they're AI? I don't know. Like, Mike could be a human verified artist because he has tour dates on Jambase, but he may use some of his music with AI. But at least we're giving you an idea or an option to say, hey, there's nothing left, there's nothing on his profile that distinguishes him from anything. But if it says human, I at least not know the guy goes out and plays show. There's some human element to that. So the other part of it is, yes, we're going to continue to get flooded with AI, and I think there is, as Mike alluded to, you probably can. There's probably a way to game some of that in user centric, but if you have a $10 subscription and you're listening to 10 bands, that means that money's only going to those 10 bands. So you would have to, if you just want to game this with a bot, have a subscription that pays $10 and listen to your AI song 1,000 times. Well, you still can only extricate the $10 subscription fee. It's not going to go higher than that. And it's not going to take away from the pro rata pool of somebody else's money. So we have a kind of a way to put a guardrail around how AI works in terms of taking money away from other artists, or gaming the system with a bot. So I think it'll shake out. We're lucky. I don't want to say we're new. We've been around 4.5 years trying to build, and we're in beta. But the narratives, I think, will change, and there'll be more and more people coming out with what should be AI or what should be taken out of distribution or whatever, but we are not a distributor. So we take whatever content is coming through the distribution at this point, and we're just hoping that with the guardrails we have set and showing human verification, that it gives some credence to people to be able to pick and choose what they want to do with the music
Yeah.
that we have.
And I think just maybe to add one thing to this before we top off with, I want to make sure I have this one question for you. Um,
Uh-oh.
on the AI side, I think it's also we have to know what's an authorized, legitimate piece of something that was either, created fully with AI or partially, or the voice was, someone else's voice, whatever it was created using authorized, legitimate platforms versus ones that have just stolen the history of music. And, that's definitely like a bifurcation that it should be at the top of everybody's heads. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack that we could do another whole session on that. But one thing, because you've spent your career, we talked about it, building businesses to support independent creators, right? What's one assumption or something about the music business you've held on for the 20 plus years that keeps proving true, no matter what?
Ooh.
Yeah. And I know I'm throwing this grenade like at
No,
the.
no, no, no. It's good because I actually have two thoughts for that. One, uh, I always go back to two things. One, trust your gut.
Hmm.
I've had plenty of times when I never trusted my gut and it was the wrong decision. But two, I think one thing that always stays true is the people in the music business that you want to either pal around with or have a mentor or work with are the people that reach out, try to help you, say thank you, and don't have a narcissistic personality. Because, and I'll say this with a
Mm,
straight face, there are a lot of people in the music industry that are they will do what they need to do to get to a place that they need to get to. But there are good people like a Mike and a Tom, and I don't mean this facetiously. I mean that you could call at a heartbeat, even if you don't know them. You may be able to reach out to LinkedIn to them and just say, trying to get into this business, trying to understand this. These are the type of people that will do something for you or at least put you in the right direction. And I find as I've gone up and down in my career for 20 plus years, those people are always there, right? Wherever they've gone
yeah.
in their career, they're still there. And when you're in a room like this or in a conference, you know the people that everybody enjoys or trusts. So if you trust your judgment, you say thank you, and you try to help other people out, that has always deemed true in my life. That you will surround yourself with good people and you'll always get some kind of feedback that you can trust.
Fantastic answer. No, I agree. I agree. It makes all the crazy worth it.
I don't know. I'll have to ask my wife that.
All right, most of it, maybe most
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the crazy is worth it. But yeah, I mean, and then it goes back to the beginning of everything, when we just chatted here. Like you end up doing whatever the fight is, or you're trying to build something or trying to get something across. It's the people you surround yourself and who you do it with that it's changes the whole game, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man. No, I agree. I agree. It's one of those. It's
I had
yeah. Go for
I
it.
have I had several questions for you, but we're at the end. I have
Yeah.
to ask you. I never asked you in the past,
Yeah, yeah.
and I thought, okay, so I'm a voracious reader, right? Like when I go to bed at night, I try to turn off everything, and I always look to guys like you that are way smarter than me. Nah, no, no, no. Like look, it took me 8 years to get out of college, so it just shows you it took me double time. That was probably because I needed to double my SAT. It was so bad, but that said. I read voraciously at night books, right? And it can be
Yeah.
anywhere from nonfiction to fiction. If you had to rank books, are there any that you continually go back to or one you keep around that helped you the most in your career?
I'd say there's there's a strategy book that I can't remember the title of it right now, but
Okay.
I'll send it to you. I have to go downstairs and find it. But there's a
Yeah, yeah.
strategy book that was like on competitive advantages and stuff like that. It's like the Harvard Business Review type thing. Like that
Ah, okay.
is really interesting just to think like macro strategy. But
Yeah.
to balance that out, the other book I would say is the Dune books.
Ah, all right.
And the reason I'm describing Dune is like I really got into it once I got to like the third book because it just kind of it's like any kind of fictional world developing, but it makes you feel really small. And it makes you feel really small in a good way, you know, like
Yeah.
there's this it's fictional, but it kind of makes you think about reality and just so I would just say the two books is, you know, strategic, just general like business book that or any kind of books like that I think are really helpful just to think of like mindsets and things like that that make you realize like how you click.
Yeah. I
Um
always find it's such a good I actually learned this from another mentor. He was an entertainment lawyer of mine years ago. Um, and I saw him ask this question always to all these people. And I said, why do you always ask that question? And he was so right once he told me and he nailed it to me. He's like, if you can ask a new person that you just met and you're going to do business with what books they read, you can actually find out more about them by reading the books they read than
mhm.
anything else. And it's been so true. Every time I read or find out books that somebody's read, and maybe I don't know them very well, and I read their books, I'm like, okay, this is how this person ticks a little bit. So
Totally.
I'm glad you.
And you know what's interesting too is like I like the exercise of you reading a book and you go to, I don't know, you start it or you're in a quarter in or whatever, and then you say to yourself, especially kind of framework way of thinking books, I try to think, what if I had to finish the book now myself? Like, how would I think this through? Like, I agree with a lot. Like, how would I finish the book? And then I finish the book. But it's
Yeah,
also a way that it makes you kind of end up being like, you know what, I agree with most of this, but if I had to write this book, which then is a great moment to be like, wait, I should write something because my thoughts are similar but different. That for me is like the fun part is finding something that really resonates, but then being like, but that's not just right. My there's something here that like I would love to tweak
yeah.
or do
That's your
different.
analytical brain.
That's my brain. Yeah, that's my brain of just like, well, why is it's like systems thinking. It's like, why is it this way? And
Yeah.
why can't we break it or
That's what my
rebuild it?
wife always tells me. She's like, I know how to get around Disney. Why are you trying to figure out a new way to get around Disney? I'm like, well, because there could
Yeah,
be a way that we could walk through the western part and get to the. She's like, stop, turn the brain off.
yeah, exactly. Oh, that's hard to do. It's hard to do. But
Well,
that would be
awesome.
like peace of mind, you know?
Yeah.
Who needs that?
That's what Sunday night's for, hopefully.
Hey, Tom.
Hey
We there?
guys,
Yeah.
this has been fantastic. Um, I feel like we didn't scratch the surface on so many topics that I was hoping we would get to. Neil, I have to ask you, I love asking my guests, what was the very first concert you went to?
Ooh.
I went to see, I was living in Germany. I saw Run DMC and Beastie Boys opened, but
Hey.
the same week that happened, it was 87, 88. Beastie Boys jumped Run DMC in the Billboard. So Run DMC opened for Beastie Boys. But the
Wow.
tour was backwards. It was supposed to be Run DMC and Beastie Boys. Yeah, I was 14, 15, 16 and had a big penis on stage and girls and drinking and all sorts of it was the Beastie Boys, right? Like they just
Yeah,
came
yeah.
out as the Beastie Boys of the 80s and I thought this is the music business.
Yeah. And and Michael asked you that question, when did you decide to get into the music business or some derivation of that earlier? Was that when it was? 14 years old at a Run DMC show? I love that.
I my parents were musicians, so
Mm.
I tried to rebel against music and pretend I didn't care because that was their job and I was around it all the time. But you can't fight what's in your blood and you know in your soul. So I decided to rebel by you know, playing records in late nightclubs. Made my parents nervous in the right ways, I guess, too.
Michael, what was your first show?
It was Rod Stewart, which was yeah, which was I'm a big fan of crooners, and I guess you know you asking that question is making me realize maybe it kind of started there.
Beastie
I
Boys?
saw Rod Stewart in England in Ipswich, and he had like 1,000 soccer balls he was kicking into the crowd the entire time. Like that was his like deal. It's like 1992 or something. I don't know.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Made an impression, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been fantastic. Neil, I really am intrigued with Vocana. I hope that you guys make it happen.
We do too.
It's exciting, and the little guy in this industry needs all the help he or she or they can get. And so, frankly, I wish you all Godspeed.
Thank
Uh,
you so much. Thank you for having me.
right on. To the audience, I promised you'd leave here today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. I think we delivered that. And thank you to Michael to once again coming and bringing
Yes,
an
thanks, Mike.
incredible guest.
Gentlemen.
Michael, I love having you on here. You are the smartest guy I know. Um,
See, I'm not the only one that says it.
oh, everybody knows that. That's classic. Next week, I promise you all will love my episode. I seldom talk about next week during this week, but that next week is one of my passion projects. If you know anything about me, you know my passion for the Grateful Dead. And for many, many years, I was an ardent collector of bootleg tapes. Well, we've got the high priest of taping on here next week, a guy named Charlie Miller. So I promise you, you're going to want to tune into that.
Oh,
Right here
wow.
next Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern again. I hope to see many of you and many others here. With that, I will sign off by simply saying, be nice to each other. The world needs more of that right now. Take care, folks.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it, guys.
Um,
Later.
Bye.